do not be the person who always plans the company picnic.
I'm here with Pam Hendrickson, who is the COO and
Vice Chairman of Strategic Initiatives.
Awesome, here at the Riverside Company. So let's just kind of start with Riverside. What is Riverside? I mean, everyone knows the name, but maybe just like what's the high level on it?
So Riverside is a multi-strategy private equity firm, and our specialty is focusing on small deals. When I say small, so lower end of the middle market, enterprise value below $400 million. We have 4 buyout funds, 2 in North America. One does companies with about 10 million, sub 10 million of EBITDA. One does companies 35 million to 10 in EBITDA. A pan-European buyout fund in Europe and a pan-European buyout fund in Australia. Okay, and we also have a couple of other strategies that invest in different parts of the capital structure. So the common element is small companies, but it's all about whether it's minority investing, we have a fund that does that, or straight up credit.
Yeah.
So we do different things.
What's the name of the credit fund?
Riverside Credit Solutions. And then there's royalty financing for B2B software. So much less dilutive than venture. So
that's really cool. I was less aware of the different strategies.
Yes, because we've been around for a long time and everybody knows us as a buyout firm, but we have all these other things that we do too. So
how many companies has Riverside invested in?
Since we started?
Yeah.
Over 600. So
that's insane.
You name it, we've kind of seen it.
Wow. That's really cool. What's your story with Riverside?
So I came to Riverside in 2006 from JP Morgan Chase, where I had been for the prior 22 years, having started when I was 4. I basically have spent my whole life in finance, and I came to Riverside mostly because of the people, and also, in the banking world, which you know well, I had done a whole bunch of mergers. And at one point I ran a department where I had, 60% of the department had to be laid off. And I really wanted to go someplace that was going to grow and not someplace that had to shrink.
So what you got here in 2006?
Yeah, so it will be 14 years next February.
What was Riverside like back in 2006?
So Riverside was small. I mean, there were probably 50 people here, and maybe we had $1 billion. Today we have $9 billion and 220 people, and all we're sort of all over the world. The infrastructure. It was important to sort of think about the infrastructure of Riverside at the time, because it was clear that Balin Store really wanted to scale the firm, and you couldn't scale it on this kind of infrastructure that just couldn't support it. As an example, QuickBooks was being used for financials.
On $1 billion?
Yeah, and probably that wasn't the ideal. I mean, it worked fine.
Hey, you're living the whole thesis of small business, right?
Exactly, and it actually worked fine. It's just that it wasn't going to scale. We built our own portfolio management system because at the time, iLevel and some of the other big systems out there that do portfolio financial capturing for firms just didn't exist. So and because we were such a high volume shop, we just had to do something, because we couldn't. Living on Excel was not gonna, as they say in the South, that dog don't hunt. So we weren't gonna. We just couldn't continue that way.
So where are you from? What's the story?
So I am from New York City. I currently live 10 blocks from where I grew up, so you can either go with no progress or deep roots. So I'm gonna go with deep roots. People, this is an interesting phenomenon, right? People have said to me over the course of my life, as I was, how could you possibly have raised your children in New York City? But the truth is, for a working couple, New York is great.
Yeah.
Because if you need to go be library mom, you can leave and come back to your office, and people will hardly know you are gone. versus needing to take a train or take a whole day off or a half day off. And you can, I mean, it will cost you money, but you could get anything you need delivered day or night. And the labor pool is excellent, so if you need help with nannies or whatever.
What was it like being a parent and managing the crew that you have? How did you and the family find balance? Did you find balance? What has that been like? I mean, the art of marriage, right here. It's
so funny because sometimes Doug and I sometimes still hold hands walking down the street, and we've been married for 32 years, and so people are like, really? But I think part of it is I didn't really think about it. I mean,
was there a give and take in terms like, okay,
absolutely.
For 5 years we're focused on you, for 5 years we're focused on Doug?
It wasn't that obvious. I think it was more, and I always say this to young women, that it is important to marry someone who's a good partner, or be with someone who's a good partner, regardless of what it is, because you need to have someone who's willing to change diapers and who's willing to sort of work with you. If I have to travel, then maybe Doug's not traveling, or maybe Doug is traveling and I'm not traveling. Now the children are out on their own, so we can do what we want. But, but I think, I don't think balance is as good a word as integration. And technology has really enabled integration. Because I think today, when I was younger, I used to have to sit in the office and wait for, Asia to call. Now I could be anywhere and Asia can call me. Doug is just, he's a great partner. And I think the other thing is that when you have a partnership like that, you're both working, it's a very give and take sort of thing. Your children develop great relationships with both parents, which I think is terrific. I think it naturally happens that people take responsibility for certain things. So in our family, I love to cook. So I tend to do the cooking. Doug does all the dishes.
Same here. Yeah.
Doug likes cars, so he's in charge of the cars. There's just things like that. I'm in charge of vacations because I travel a lot, and so I'm very, good and savvy at travel. So, I think naturally you'll sort of take the things that you like and that you're good at. So one thing that my mother once told me, which was a really great piece of advice, is it is about quality of time, not as much quantity. And part of the reason, our children probably grew up in a slightly paramilitary organization relative to how parents are today. When I say bed, that means bed. Do your homework before you do anything else. There were a lot of rules, but that also meant that when, we went out to dinner or, did something together as a family, we had a great time.
Going back to what was your first job?
My very first job was cleaning houses when I was 12 years old. And I learned how to, the person I was cleaning for was had a very set way of doing things, some of which were a little odd, but I learned how to clean houses. And I used to cater people's cocktail parties when I was a little older. And then I started teaching tennis. And that was a much better job, frankly, because I was outside all the time and, tennis teachers get paid relatively well and you're outside and you don't really teach much because no one wants to take a lesson between 12 and 3, so you go to the beach, So it was really not bad.
And then did you, growing up, actually looking back, who were you more like, your mom or your dad?
Well, my dad was enormously intellectual. Really, really brilliant and could paint, you take him to a Broadway show and he would sit down and play it for you on the piano, even though he couldn't read music, both hands. He was astonishing. He was also tended to be quite impatient with people if he felt like they weren't adding value to the process or weren't very intelligent. I might have picked up a little bit of that quality. And my mother, enormously gracious. Everyone loved my mother. And just really, and actually, this story I was just telling someone this morning. At her memorial service, the minister was talking about the fact that my mother used to hate she was on the altar guild in our church, and she had these beanies. You had to wear these beanies as part of the altar guild, and she really hated the beanies. And one day they didn't have the collection plate in church. And Hugh said, and so I saw that little twinkle that your mother used to get in her eye, and all of a sudden the beanie became a collection plate. So that, that was, anyway.
How did their parenting style kind of influence yours, either consciously or we've seen later?
I think the rules part of it. I think Doug and I are probably a lot more. I think generations change a lot, and I think I grew up in an era of much more, please do it because I said so, versus now where it's a little more, I don't think you should do that because, where we would have a more rational or a more explanatory conversation.
That's interesting. Yeah,
I might still say no, but I might explain my reasoning for no more than just saying I'm the parent, therefore.
That's cool to hear. What was the experience like at JP Morgan, and just kind of what was the trajectory and the path that you went down there?
So I think confidence is a really important quality to have, particularly if you're going to be a female in finance. And luckily for me, I would say if I was thinking about one thing I took from both of my parents, it was that. They definitely were big on you can pretty much do whatever you want, and if something goes wrong, we're always here for you. So at JP Morgan, I would say, which started out as Chemical Bank, it was always having that confidence. It was always looking at something and looking for potentially a better way to do it. So as an example, I was an associate, and I had to do this ridiculous project where there was banks would send in their quarterly reports, and then we would have to translate them into an Excel spreadsheet and say whether it was this was good or bad. It was all ratios and stuff.
Yeah.
So I was like, there's just got to be a better way to do this. Isn't there some electronic way we can do this? So it turned out there was, and in those days, this is 100 bajillion years ago, computers had tapes with holes in them. So you could get the tapes that the banks would send to the Fed, and then you could build a program and feed them in yourself. And we did that, another associate and I. And then everybody thought it was so cool. Like our boss invited the president of the bank to see it, and that night we crashed the entire Chemical Bank's computer system. And stayed up all night manually inputting the data. But then it did actually work after that. And it was really cool. Now later, some much more tech savvy person developed a new tool that was way better. But for, just the fact that we thought of it and that we did it and we had the ratios all kind of done. So, I think
was that like an early lesson for you, just thinking like, we just have to be different? Do you think you consciously, on a regular basis, whether it's where you're at now and the position you're at now at Riverside, do you see a history of that in your career of like actively thinking how to look at something differently?
I probably don't actively think as much as I should look at this differently as there has to be a better way to do this. This is really inefficient. So there has to be a better way than Excel and 400 people emailing each other about whether this company's earnings are right. There has to be a better way to do that. And then we built it. So that has definitely been helpful. And that's been a confidence thing, right? That's partly it's just saying, okay, I'm just going to go do this and hopefully apologize later if it doesn't work. But it will work. I have confidence that it will work. Yeah, I will. Yeah, it will work.
On the shifting a little bit on the kind of topic of females in finance, what have you seen in your 20 plus years in the industry, and even maybe in the past 10 within private equity, 10 plus? What have you seen in terms of the landscape of women in either investment roles, the evolution of, for example, it might have been 10 years ago, people got to associate, then they headed out. And now they've got a partner or, and you've seen it develop from the LP perspective. Just can you talk more broadly about the evolution of women in finance within private equity? Big topic.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I did an ACG event in Boston, which was just women in finance, and it was like tips from Pam on whatever. And so a few of my tips, which they made little bookmarks out of, I think were things that were important to women, which was, do not be the person who always plans the company picnic. Right? And take up space, because when you're in a room and you're talking, take up space. Women have a tendency to have their voice go up at the end of a sentence. Hi Jordan, or I can't even do it actually. But don't do that. Don't do the girly like curl your hair with your finger thing. So I think it's important to recognize some of those things that women sometimes have a tendency to do and should not do, and
aren't self-aware of that.
And aren't self-aware, and no one tells, because there have been so few women in finance. There's no one to tell you, to say, really, you should stop doing that. And I was really lucky in my career at JP Morgan. I had a mentor, Jimmy Lee, and the great thing about Jimmy was he would tell you. I mean. And today you probably couldn't do this because of Me Too and whatever, but he would take you in his office and go, "Would you please get your stuff together? Because you really screwed that up."
So that direct, candid feedback from a mentor,
right?
Was there an active mentorship, or was it more just like a role model?
It was just
who
a
really,
role model.
Really spoke their mind.
I think actually this is another thing. I think there's a difference between mentors and sponsors. Because I think mentors are someone you can go to because you have a question about you, because you're, a female in a difficult career and you have to travel, but you have children and you don't know how to deal with it. So I need to find another woman I can talk to about this. That's a little bit more of a mentoring relationship versus a sponsor who does what Jimmy did for me and in a big meeting of senior management says, I think Pam's the right person for that job. And gets behind it and pushes you. And I think that is really, really helpful.
What are some other kind of, what organizations do you belong to, or have you seen that are actively talking about, females in finance? For example, ACG might have their networking events, but what are some other ones that you've seen and other kind of resources for the community to know about?
Well, I do think that Kelly's Pink Light program at PE Win is great because, and this is the thing that makes me so happy, which is that increasingly there are women starting their own firms. And so as that happens, 10 years from now, the private equity industry won't look the way it looks, at least I hope, now, because these women are getting behind their own firms. They're smart about how they're building them. And we have to really help each other a lot. I had drinks with one last night, and she said, I've just been astonished at how many people are supporting me. And I think that's because we're all we're rooting for these women to really succeed.
Do you think it's finally at that chapter in the evolution where, although the fund count is not there, the infrastructure is there in terms of PE, Project Pink Light with PE One, has that accelerator program for
right.
Kinsey Capital, Suzanne Yoon,
right.
And then the other resources, and then the awareness from the LP perspective. Do you think the groundwork has finally been laid, and then this next vintage, once?
I think it's getting there. I think that the reality of the private equity industry is that until the LP community says, well, if you have no women, I'm not investing with you regardless of your returns, or you have no diversity.
Yeah.
Let's not make it about women. It'll be harder to make the change, but I think if you have good returns and you have diversity, then you're an obvious choice. But I mean, I was at an event Kelly organized actually, and I asked a question to the CIO of a large pension fund, and this pension fund gives an award for the most diverse GP that they have. And so I said, well, let's just suppose we have two funds. One is in the top quartile and one is in the bottom quartile. I mean, they're both top quartile, but one's at the top of the top quartile, one's on the bottom of the top quartile. But the one at the top has no diversity at all, and the one at the bottom, 1 year award. Who gets the money?
Yeah.
And the top quartile guy still gets the money. So until that changes, it's going to be harder.
It's going to be some mixture of people who say, this is our mandate, we are going to invest in diversity. And people said, listen, I don't care. I have a fiduciary responsibility. And then,
I think that's right. But I also think that the combination of women and millennials will actually drive change in the work environment, because I think there have not been enough women to say, why does it matter where I work from? As long as I'm getting my work done. But I think the millennial generation, is very much behind that, and that is their expectation.
I mean, 51 Labs, like, my chief of staff is in San Diego, account executive is in Florida, our our post-production team is in the Philippines.
Right.
We have videographer in LA, we have videographer here, and guess what? Like, the machine actually works.
Exactly.
So that's really cool, because it's like as the millennials, this generation has grown up with the expectations that it doesn't matter where you work. It's more of, are you getting stuff done?
Right.
That's really, really good point, because then that also allows, women to not leave the workforce.
Exactly.
To find careers that support whatever either they want to stay home, or maybe both parents want to have a little more flexibility.
Exactly. And I actually remember that when I was on the operating committee at JP Morgan, we did actually, just for my own group, I had this thing where I said, okay, 1 day a week, this is for all my managers, you have to go do something. I don't care what it is. Go coach a soccer team, go do whatever it is. And you have to leave at 4, and you have to tell everyone you're doing it. You have to tell everyone why you're doing it. Because I just wanted to create that culture where people felt really comfortable doing that.
How have you evolved as a leader? And maybe it was a time that, just messed up, and that almost was an impetus to really change and grow as a person, as an individual.
Well, hopefully you always learn a ton of things along the way. Certainly, I've always liked to be in charge of things. Since I was like 3, so. But what you learn as a leader, I think, is number one, people observe what you're doing a lot more than you realize. So one day I walked into JP Morgan and I don't know, I was thinking about something else, whatever I was doing, and I didn't say good morning to people. And there had been a series of layoffs. And so my assistant was kind enough to say to me, everyone thinks they're getting laid off because you didn't say good morning to them. And I was like, what? So you really learn that the band narrows a lot in terms of observation of the behaviors that you exhibit. 2, I think you have to learn to delegate, and for me at least, the tendency is to leap in and want to solve every problem. And you can't do that because A, the people who work for you don't grow. And B, you're sending them a message that you don't think they're competent when you do that. So
when was that? Was there a particular stage in the career when that happened? You're like, wow, I am trying to do too much myself, and I have to train the people around me.
I think that sort of evolved over time. I think at various different points. I still have to catch myself because I still have it is my natural tendency to want to just go fix it. And so I have to, go.
When you look back on your career, what are some of the things that you're most proud of?
Oh gosh, things I'm most proud of. It's funny because I really think a bit much more about my teams than about me in particular. So, I think we have accomplished a lot at Riverside just in building the infrastructure and building out Riverside University and building out the portfolio management system. I think I happen to be pretty good at hiring people. So I'm proud of the fact that I have hired really great people, so eventually they don't really need you anymore because they're great people. So you have
maybe
to
a different way to say this
different.
is like, or different topics, like, what do you think your like Pam's superpower is?
Superpower, yeah. I think I am really good at hiring people. I think I've been able to judge pretty quickly whether a person has fire in the belly and is able to do it. And I think I am a good communicator. I think I speak pretty well, which has served me well, especially in these positions like chairman of the ACG board. I'm on the executive committee of the American Investment Council, which is it's a fairly male-dominated group. So the ability to hold your own and say something in front of a whole lot of people